And welcome to the Physician Assistant Admission Panel. My name is Tao Man, and I'm a Pre-PA Programming Coordinator for this year's conference. First, I would like to take a moment to thank the AAMC for their sponsorship for our 12th Annual Pre-PA and Pre-Health National Conference, and make it possible We would like to thank the AAMC for their sponsorship for our 12th Annual Pre-PA and Pre-Health National Conference, and make it possible for online viewing. Today, I will be moderating the admission panel that will discuss various admission criteria, application process, and other general questions related to admission in a question and answer format. For the past 6 months, we've been collecting questions submitted by pre-PA students through our online forum, Twitter, and other social media. We've hand-selected the most popular questions for today's panel. If you have any other questions, please feel free to post questions on Facebook or Twitter with the hashtag UCDPHSA14, and the most popular question will be integrated live into today's panel. Please welcome our 3 distinguished panelists that came from various institutions. Can we please have our panelists to take a brief moment to introduce your name, your title, and the institution that you're representing, starting with and welcoming Dr. Essary.
Well, good morning and greetings from the University of Iowa. My name is Dave Essary, where I serve as a department chair for the Department of Physician Assistant Studies and Services in the Carver College of Medicine. I also wear a hat as an assistant dean in the Office of Student Affairs and Curriculum at that institution as well.
Good morning. My name is John Siiteri. I'm an assistant clinical professor in the UC Davis Nurse Practitioner Physician Assistant Program. I'm involved in teaching there, as well as sitting on the interview committee for student admissions. And I'm very happy to be here and answer your questions.
Good morning. My name is Leah Baldwin, and I'm from Pacific University in Oregon, and I work with our Physician Assistant Program. I'm Associate Director of Graduate and Professional Admissions there, and I've been doing PA admissions for 6 years, and I'm happy to be here and answer questions.
Okay, we'll start off. Can each panelist take 2 to 3 minutes to answer a common question asked by pre-PA students? What set your school apart from other schools? We'll start with Dr. Essary.
Great, thank you. So in terms of things that would set our particular program apart from some of the other PA programs around the country, we have had for quite some time integration of our PA students and medical students in the curriculum aspect. And so actually for the course or group of students who just came in this fall, we have implemented a very unique curriculum at our institution where the PA and medical students actually take the same first 3 semesters of curriculum. Exact same classes, expected to pass at the same level. There's no difference in terms of how the PA or the medical student is treated. In large part, we think that it's a great opportunity for our PA students to work very closely with physicians, for physicians to also learn about the PA students. That's the team that they often are going to be working most closely with when they're in after graduation and in their first position. And so being trained alongside each other and working very closely with each other, we think it provides a great opportunity for them to really learn about each other, from each other, and be well prepared to work on teams in that capacity. So that just started up this fall. We have, like I mentioned, a long tradition of our students doing that. Some people think, gosh, that seems a little unfair to put your PA students in with the medical students. Mm-hmm. But the reality is they have for many, many years performed at or above the same level as the medical students. So we know we're not putting them at a disadvantage. They're very capable and do a great job. And again, I think it prepares them very well. So that's probably the most distinguishing feature about our particular program.
At the UC Davis Nurse Practitioner Physician Assistant Program, we're also very committed to interprofessional education. We also have nurse practitioners, which is a very unique component of our program. Nurse practitioner and physician assistant students are taking the same courses through the full 24 months of the nurse practitioner program. The PA students then go on for another 3 months in clinical rotations and other work. The emphasis is on interprofessional education. We're housed in the School of Nursing in the same education building, actually, where the medical students have their classes. And there is an interprofessional education approach from the faculty, both from the School of Nursing, the School of Medicine, and then from the NPPA faculty as well. So those are the main features that I think distinguish us, that we're the only combined program in the country that trains both MP and PA students simultaneously. I'd say the other factor about our mission here at UC Davis is that we have deliberately chosen students that are coming from backgrounds, particularly in Central California, but rural settings in general, to serve the needs of underserved populations in certainly California, but also in the Western United States and elsewhere. I think the other really attractive feature about UC Davis MPPA program is that we are housed in the School of Nursing. That's also a unique feature, and it has it raises some questions, well, how that happened, but the School of Nursing has a very ambitious mission to advocate innovative teaching, leadership, and to serve as change agents in this very fast-changing area of healthcare that we're now moving into, and identifying and recognizing the important role that nurse practitioner and physician assistants will play as team members in delivering those healthcare needs.
So at Pacific University, our program is 27 months long, and for our didactic phase, I think this is what can set us apart, is that we divide the body into systems, and we have a systems-based approach. So you would study everything for cardiology for 2 weeks, for example, before moving on to gastroenterology, for example. So our students move through that curriculum, and it's a pass-fail curriculum, so we truly try and create that cohort program once students are in our program. During our clinical phase, that's something else that sets us apart, is we're more of a travel program. So we do send students across the nation, with 80% of our sites being at rural health sites. So for us, rural health is very important and something that we emphasize along with serving the underserved. Something else that's semi-new for us is our simulation lab, which some of you may have seen at the fair. The military had a booth up that they were doing the simulation lab, and so we actually have one of those on our campus as well. And during the didactic year, our students go in there for 10 different times to go through kind of real-world scenarios and see what it's like to be in that setting before we set them loose on those clinical rotations. So those are some of the things that I think sets us apart.
Okay. Here is another common question. What helped an individual stand out in their application? And we'll start from Dr. Essary.
I'm sorry, you said what?
What helps an individual stand out in their application?
So obviously, as you may have become well aware, there are a fairly large number of applicants around the country that are applying to PA schools. The good news is there are more and more PA programs coming on board, so it's really important to think about how you might set yourself apart in that somewhat competitive process that you're entering into. Certainly, I think for us, and it varies a little bit from each program, so particularly you would want to pay attention to the schools that you're anticipating you're going to apply to, look at their mission statements, look at the other information about that particular school so that you're well aware of what their particular unique features or mission is. In our process, we're definitely looking for individuals who have had obviously a very good, solid preparation in the basic sciences. In our curriculum, where the students are taking the coursework with the medical students, we look to make sure we're not bringing people in who maybe have not had the right set of coursework, who have not demonstrated the ability to perform well over a sustained period of time in rigorous science coursework. So we're definitely looking for that. At the same time, it's not as simple as just drawing a line, on the GPA. We look at trends that occur over time. Sometimes a student may not be focused and motivated real early on, but as they then begin to determine that they would like to enter into the PA profession, they really can perform well over a sustained period. So we do look at the trends and performance. In terms of really distinguishing yourself, I think we're looking for individuals who have had varied backgrounds. So we like to have individuals who represent our country as a whole and that can relate well to individuals. So anything that you have done in terms of being parts of teams, being a part of a leadership activity where you work closely with individuals, certainly having taken the time to shadow and talk with other PAs so that you're coming into the profession with your eyes open to what some of the pros as well as what some of the cons might be considered for the role of the PA is really important. We want you to be able to convince our group that you really have indeed done your homework and are very knowledgeable about the PA profession and the PA role when you get to the point of interviewing in particular. And then that, I think, coupled with, unfortunately, to a degree, there is a need for you to demonstrate your ability to do well on standardized test taking. I wish I could tell you that we never use standardized test taking in our evaluation of students, but the reality is we still look at your ability to demonstrate knowledge in that format. So we do allow either the GRE or the MCAT as a standardized test that we also take into consideration. And so preparing yourself well for that, and then when you sit for the exam, you know, demonstrating your knowledge on that is valuable for you in terms of distinguishing yourself.
What I would say first is that we don't require the GRE, and having the experience of sitting on reading at least the essays submitted through CASPA, and if you're not familiar with that process, and that's certainly something you should be aware of. But the very first thing that I would say that makes an impression on me as a candidate for admission is a strong personal narrative about why you are drawn specifically to become a physician assistant, or in our case, also a nurse practitioner. I think that many people have the idea that you can obtain the clinical hours in many different ways. Certainly the academics are important, but we tend not to focus entirely on academics either. Again, because of the uniqueness of our mission, that is to serve, really select students who are going to go back to communities and serve areas where they may have come from. In fact, our program is an excellent record of placing almost 2/3 of our graduates in primary care, and many of those, half of those, are in more rural settings. So again, identifying for our committee and promoting on to the next step of offering interviews, the applicants that we've reviewed, we look for a narrative that is consistent in what their inherent values are, their personal values, what's driven them during the course of their lives, whether they're young and new and inexperienced, or older people who are coming back to have a change in careers to make a difference. And I think in addition to all the academic requirements that are certainly necessary, we're looking for a commitment to serve others, to work as a team member. It's very important as well to identify, you haven't just done this as an isolated individual, but you've demonstrated team playing as well. So again, that passion, that personal narrative of why it's so important for you to become a PA or an NP is really a standout for us.
Yeah, so there's not a whole lot I can add to this because they did a great job answering the question. We also do not require the GRE or MCAT, but about 73%, I think was the last statistic I saw, of PA programs do require some sort of standardized testing, so it's something that you're probably going to be faced with taking, and that's increased over the last 5 years. I think when I first started, it was more like 50% of programs. So we're all looking for ways, trying to find the best applicants for our programs in a variety of manners. For Pacific, we do look at academics pretty strongly in our process, and it's one of the most heavily weighted things in our process, especially that GPA. Above and beyond that, we are looking for the well-rounded essay, the well-rounded patient care experience, and just the well-rounded person in general. All of us are trying to create a cohort that meshes well together and likes to be in the classroom and are teachable. So we're all trying to find those students that can sit in that classroom and want to learn, as well as have that passion for the profession. I think that's probably our #1 thing, is the knowledge and passion for the profession, because we don't want you to get in that classroom and realize, oops, PA is not the right one for me, and then have you drop out. That's not our goal. We want to make sure that we're educating students who really know what they're getting themselves into and have a high level of passion for it, because it takes a lot to get through a PA program. It's very time and academic intensive, so we want to make sure we're choosing the right students. So the essay, the patient care experience, those are all things that we're looking for to try and figure out, what do you know about the profession and how passionate are you for the profession?
To elaborate on that, I'll direct this question to Dr. Siiteri. How would you advise a student who is uncertain about which health profession to pursue, PA versus MD or PA versus NP? Dr. Siiteri.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Let's see. I would say the way to frame that question is, in In terms of your own, again, it goes to your individual values. You have to decide on the commitment that you're going to make after your very strenuous undergraduate studies. If you want to continue that kind of, persistent study in a very demanding and lengthy process that can achieve a certain endpoint, as a physician, you would have more training, more clinical experiences, and certainly more responsibility. I don't know if, as an MD, would have the flexibility that is one of the hallmarks of the physician assistant program. PAs are trained as primary care providers. PAs can go into different fields based on their education, their experience, and the ability of the supervising physician to train the physician assistant. I'm not, by any means, want to emphasize the importance of MDs. Or if that's your interest, I think that is some kind of decision that you really need to make as to what it is that you have in terms of your time, your commitment, your finances, your family obligations that are going to serve you and all the others that are interested in your development best. So that addresses the question about MD versus physician assistant, time, money, and commitment. Secondly, the difference between becoming a physician assistant versus a nurse practitioner. By definition, nurse practitioners are first RNs. And the RNs then who go on to become nurse practitioners generally, based on accreditation and certifications, generally are not as flexible as PAs are in going from one discipline in medicine to another. Functionally, however, during the course of my career as a PA for almost 16 years now, functionally there's not a lot of difference. And I've worked with many different NPs, PAs in different settings, and I would say functionally there's not a lot of difference. And in terms of the evaluative processes that have occurred so far, there's really no difference in outcomes, patient outcomes, or in patient satisfaction. Again, as a nurse practitioner student, you first have to be an RN, generally have a number of years of experience, 4 to 5 years of experience. That also applies for the PA students that are generally being admitted to our program, at least 4 to 5 years of, or at least on average, 4 to 5 years of some clinical experience.
Would anyone else like to elaborate on that?
Maybe just to comment, the area we in particular see overlap is individuals who may enter into their undergraduate knowing they want to do something in the health sciences, really wrestling with between a physician and a PA. I think there's tremendous overlap between the two professions. I work closely with MD students as well as PA students, and we frequently have individuals who go as far as into entering their 4th year of college, not 100% sure yet exactly which one of those two professions they're ultimately going to select for. As was mentioned, I think there are some very valuable things about being a PA in terms of the flexibility. Changing specialties perhaps allows individuals to not feel as locked in or maybe be as susceptible to burnout that you might sometimes otherwise encounter. But I think also, an important feature of that is that in many instances, physicians in their training and ultimately in practice find themselves actually being the primary leader of a team. There are certain elements where PAs, nurse practitioners, pharmacists, others could be leaders of teams in healthcare and do so, not infrequently. But I think the reality is if you really have a personality or have that particular passion to really sort of be the lead person of the healthcare team in most settings, then I would say probably being a physician might be a better match for you than being a PA. So those are some of the things we find people wrestling through. Certainly time and training is a big factor. Indebtedness is a big factor. That can impact your lifestyle and other issues that are going to be important to you when you're in practice, so you need to consider those carefully as well.
I think I won't repeat what they've said because they did a great job again, but as a takeaway item or an action point, I would say shadow all the areas that you're interested in. I cannot emphasize that enough. That's something that probably each admissions committee can say that they do look for is shadowing hours. Our average, I think, for shadowing is around 40 to 120 hours depending on the year, which is a lot of shadowing. I think 40 hours is usually a good time. It's a week's worth of time, but if you do that with each profession, I think you'll naturally gravitate towards one of the professions more so than another. So that may be an action item to kind of take away from that.
Here's the question to Ms. Baldwin. It's a fun question. What is your favorite part of the application to review?
Did you want one of us to start?
Oh, Ms. Baldwin.
Oh, okay. I get to go first this time. I think my favorite, this is probably most people's favorite, so I'm stealing their answer probably, but would definitely be the personal essay, because that's the time when you have the freedom to talk about whatever it is you want to share with us. So we can get a variety of things. Sometimes it's too much information, sometimes it's not enough information, but that's where we really see the personality of that applicant shine. So I think out of the paper round, that's probably my favorite to see and review and know about. And perhaps a question is coming later about how to write an essay, but we'll leave that for another time.
Would anyone else like to elaborate?
I would just add that I agree. I mean, the personal narrative can be an interesting place for us to learn about your passion and your real interest in the profession and why you're driven to that particular profession. But to be honest with you, I really like sort of piecing together the story. I mean, knowing sort of your educational background. Where did you start? Did you switch schools? If so, can I sort of determine maybe why that was the case? You know, did you perhaps over time find yourself performing better as you got further along in your training? You know, were you a student who maybe struggled a little bit as you came out, but really learned how to learn, really got motivated and passionate and demonstrated the ability to do well over time? What types of healthcare environments have you been exposed to? So just being able to sort of piece together your story. If you're a non-traditional student, you've been out in another profession, I love to find that out. Sort of learn, you know, what particular skills or abilities might you bring to the table as a result of those previous experiences as well.
And I would say, in addition to all the other comments, which I think were really right on, that volunteer experiences, particularly in service to, again, communities or patient populations that are not well served, sometimes international missions, if they're just, you know, kind of like going off for 1 week and dropping in and then coming out, they look good and they demonstrate some commitment. But those are the things that are, again, they may be one-on demonstrations of that kind of commitment, but a consistent pattern of volunteer time and organization or contributing to an effort that serves others always stands out, at least in my mind.
Okay. What are the important factors to consider when deciding which PA program to apply to? And we'll start with Dr. Essary.
Yeah, that's a great question, and this is where it does take a little bit of homework on your part in terms of trying to decide which programs are going to be a good fit with you. Unfortunately, we have not standardized ourselves in terms of expected prerequisites, and so you do want to look carefully at your own background and what areas you would be able to meet the prerequisites for, or which ones you're willing to add to your list of things that you'll accomplish, so that you do have yourself well prepared as you're getting ready to apply to those particular schools of interest to you. And so that's certainly an important feature in that process. I think length of time in training is important as well. Some individuals may find greater comfort in going through a slightly longer program that maybe has more depth, or maybe has just a, if there is such a thing, a kinder pace to the process. Others maybe are looking for the shortest time in training. They're eager to get out and get in practice, and that may be particularly valuable to you. So they do vary in length considerably, and so you want to take that into consideration as you're thinking about the various programs that exist. And then the other piece that I think, while there's at least a fair amount of uniformity because of the accreditation requirements that exist in terms of our curriculum overall, the clinical year in particular, where you go out and do your various rotations, can be quite different in terms of how those are formatted. While again, we all have requirements from an accreditation standpoint to make sure that our students are exposed to and have certain types of experiences, the way in which that might be packaged or sequenced or allowed to play out can be very different from one school to the next. And so from that perspective, if you're somebody who thinks, boy, I'd really value that opportunity to rotate through a different specialty every 4 to 6 weeks and experience a very broad set of experiences that hopefully will have you then in very good position to be well prepared to enter any specialty, that's great. On the other hand, you might say, gosh, I already know I'm dedicated to primary care, And so I want to look for a program that in particular is really going to put together a clinical year that perhaps has a preceptorship, or which is an opportunity typically where you might spend as much as 3 months or more in a particular setting with a clinical group, that allows you to really sort of settle in, see patients over time, really get a good feel for what it's like at that particular practice in that particular specialty. So there are some of those differences that exist across the different programs that you might want to ask them about, or look on their information on their websites, et cetera, and really explore, so that again you're finding a good match for you. And I think it's really, to a degree, you need to think about what's your end result, what are you trying to accomplish as you're graduating from that program, and then tease that out from the different PA programs that might be on your list.
Would Dr. Siiteri would like to add anything to that?
I don't think so, no. Very good. Very well said.
I think that was well said as well. I was just going to add in that it also needs to be a place that you feel personally comfortable, because it is time and academically intensive, and you need to make sure that you feel your best at that location so that you can perform your best during that time. And if it's too far away from home, or too close to home, or not near a certain city, or maybe you do want it to be more in a rural site, you know, whatever the case may be and whatever speaks to you, you need to feel at home so that you can academically do your best in that time frame.
Okay, here's a question for Dr. Siiteri. What has been the most rewarding aspect of your career thus far?
Is that as an educator or as a physician assistant? I've only been an educator for the last 6 months, so I can address that initially first. I really enjoy teaching, and it is something that I have been doing for a lot of years in many different settings, but to be able to participate in preparing the next generation of physician assistants and nurse practitioners is a wonderful opportunity for me, and I'm committed to doing the best I can at that. As a physician assistant for 16 years, what has been the most gratifying part of my career is the interaction that I've had with my patients. And it's what drew me to medicine in general, but also particularly as a physician assistant, because I've had, and I think this is almost true for most practicing PAs, I have the luxury of time. I don't feel quite as rushed perhaps as my physician colleagues do to see as many patients as possible. The studies show that we don't spend a whole lot, that as PAs versus MDs, don't spend a whole lot more time with our patients, but it's how we listen to them and give them the opportunity to tell their story, and in return they feel they understand that they've been heard. And that is as much a therapeutic intervention as any medication or procedure that I think I could prescribe or direct the patient to. So for me, it's the sense that I've really made a difference in a person's life. I've contributed to their well-being, and to the extent possible, I've relieved suffering for them or their family members. So that, for me, has been one of the most gratifying parts of my career as a PA.
Would Dr. Essary would like to say anything?
So I think if you had a chance to listen to Stephanie Vandermeulen speak earlier as the keynote speaker, she did a great job of really articulating the profession and the clinical elements of that, and so I'm not going to elaborate more on that. For me, though, in terms of being an educator, I think the thing that's really exciting to me is that partnership with the students, to really be able to help them accomplish their end goal of coming out the other end of that process as a great clinician, ready to really take on any different number of specialties, any different number of opportunities from a clinical setting. And it's, to me, it's a little bit like, the analogy that is often made about the pebble in the pond where the ripples, extend further out. Certainly having that opportunity to train a clinician who in turn is going to go out and use the practices that you've helped them, and the knowledge and skills and abilities you've helped them acquire, will then impact, obviously, many, many, many patients over the course of their career. And so having that opportunity to really be at that foundational phase when the individuals are learning their skills as a clinician, and knowing that they're in turn going to take those out and use them with their patients for many years to come, is a very rewarding part.
Here's a common question. What are some of the most common mistakes individuals make when applying? And we'll start with Ms. Baldwin.
Sure. I think one of the easiest to correct mistakes would be to make sure that you're completely filling out that CASPA. We frequently see phrases such as, please don't forget to fill this in later, on their job description or something of that nature, and those are easy things to fix. Also, the correct spelling of physician assistant is a big one, and while it's not going to make or break an applicant usually because it is such a common mistake, it is something that's easy to correct. Something easy to avoid. So those are kind of some easy ones. Above and beyond that, the mistakes people make are not sharing enough about yourself so that we can make an educated decision about you. We do see a lot of essays that are very formulaic or possibly a Google response to what is a PA and why do I want to be a PA. They're not speaking from the heart and they're not showing us their passion and individual personality. They're telling us exactly the definition that we could have learned ourselves on the internet. And so making sure that your essay and all of your responses are coming from you and coming from something that we're not going to hear from every single individual, but that shows something about you as a person so that we can make an educated decision on whether or not we'd like to interview you, then ultimately admit you. So those are offhand some common things. I'm sure I'll think of more as my fellow panel people respond.
I do, again, I think it's really important to describe the path that led you to apply for the PA program that you're interested in. And related to the essay, try to not have that be so sounding like it was coached. It's almost a distractor, and I know that I've had problems just getting through that first paragraph where the hook, I call it the hook, you know, it gets your attention and you okay, you got my attention, now justify why you've gotten my attention. Generally that happens, but sometimes that can be a distraction. And then, yes, be sure that you detail succinctly the experiences that have been formative in leading you to consider being a physician assistant and using that authentic voice of your own.
And I would just add, just to clarify, the misspelling isn't usually the word physician or assistant, it's that they utilize the with an apostrophe S. So physician's assistant sort of sets us off typically when we see that on your application. So, and again, it's a very common error, so it's not like you're really doing something that's not been done before, but just to give you a heads up, that will usually make admissions folks get a little bit, ruffle their feathers, we'll just say. The other piece that I would suggest is that really I think the shadowing piece is really important, and I know how difficult it's become to get shadowing opportunities now with the patient privacy issues and other things that are in play. It's becoming increasingly difficult to find an individual who may let you come to their practice. But the reality is we're looking for individuals who really have taken the time to find out specifically what the role of the PA is like. So if you can't shadow with the PA, ask if you can meet them for lunch sometime and just sort of talk with them about, you know, what are the pros, what are the cons of your, you know, what is it that's really been rewarding, what are the things that sort of, you know, are still bothersome to you about the role of the PA, so that you're really knowledgeable coming into that and can articulate those as part of your admissions materials, that you've really looked at that, you've done your homework, you know what you're getting into. This wasn't just sort of a, gosh, maybe I'll try the PA profession this year and submit an application, but instead you've really been working hard, have done your homework, know the background of the profession, have talked with individuals who've practiced in the profession, and can share that knowledge in your written materials.
In your opinion, what are the biggest challenges facing students entering into your field today? And we'll start with Ms. Baldwin.
Perhaps one of my other panelists would be better suited to answer this. I'm not a PA, so I think the other two may be better suited to answer.
Is it the challenge? I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
What are the biggest challenges facing students entering into your field today?
Entering into the program or the field?
The field.
The field, I see. You know, challenges are just what you deal with when you're starting a new career, and you know, I've not been in a program long enough to know what the challenges are, but our graduates are getting a minimum of 2 to 3 offers for each per student. So I think the opportunities that are there. I think in terms of the biggest challenge going into the profession as a physician assistant is finding the right match for you. That is, as and I use this lightly, a dependent practitioner. We are team members. We are licensed to practice medicine under the supervision of either a licensed MD or a DO. But that relationship is really critical. And I think as a beginning physician assistant, that is really an important, it's hard to identify because you may have interviewed for a number of jobs, but to get the sense of, is this the person I'm really going to collaborate with and be a real team member? Or will they respect my contributions? Will they once I've demonstrated my capacity, will they allow me more and more independence? And I've worked in many different settings where the quality of that relationship really determined not only my satisfaction, but also the patient's satisfaction. So I think that is probably the biggest challenge, is finding, after you've graduated, what's going to be that best match. And then determining, obviously, what specialty or practice will you go into? What are the further lessons or actual, component that you need to know in order to do your job? If you're going to go into a surgical subspecialty, there's a lot more training that you will get on the job. If that's something you're interested in, you'll be motivated to do so. But the overall thing is, once you get out of the program, you're still going to be learning. You'll be an adult life learner for the remainder of your career. And so maybe that's the notion also, is that, number one, you have to have confidence in what you've learned, that you've been trained to go out and start working fairly quickly, but that you will continue to learn on the job. And so you want to make sure you'll have those kinds of opportunities given to you, that your position will be respected as a beginning practitioner that will continue to learn with hopefully the best circumstances in your new job.
Yeah, so John has highlighted, I think, some of the really key points. I think the lifelong learning piece is really critical. As much as I would like to think we could somehow magically infuse all the medical knowledge there is into your brain and you'd be set for the rest of your career, the reality is that we have new discovery of information in medicine on a daily basis that impacts your practice. And so if you are hoping to sort of graduate from a profession and just be kind of set, not have to really go back and keep continually learning, then this would not be a great fit for you. This is one of the challenges, and our profession holds the bar quite high in terms of the number of hours that are expected for you to complete in terms of continuing medical education and activities of that nature. So that certainly is a challenging piece of it. I would also offer that the healthcare field is very much changing in a lot of different ways. It's the business aspects of medicine are perhaps more prominent than they were when I entered the profession over 25 years ago. And what I mean by that is just that, as a country, our nation continues to struggle. We have great individuals who are well-trained. We spend an incredible amount of money on healthcare, and yet we still don't have nearly as good of outcomes as many other countries in the world. And so, that business aspect is going to get paid a lot of attention to. We're needing to find better ways to deliver healthcare to individuals, to populations, and that changes the way we practice. And so you have to be flexible and willing, I think, to be able to adapt to those types of changes. And then also, as John mentioned, I think being a team member is becoming increasingly important and valuable. The partnership is obviously with the other health providers in your system, but also very much with the patient. Recognizing that, if you have the best possible diagnosis and treatment for your patient, but you prescribe something that they're really either unable or unwilling to participate in as part of that treatment, you really have not helped the patient out. And so finding those good ways to really partner with them, to make those connections, to help, if you will, coach them along in a way that is going to help them really affect the change that would either extend their life or make their life better, is really a valuable skill, but also a challenge in the role of the PA for sure.
Here's another question. Are there any misconceptions about the application process that you feel the need to be clarified? And we'll start with Ms. Baldwin.
There's probably quite a few, unfortunately. Misconception, I think probably the biggest one is that we're all the same. and that we're all going to, each program is going to review everything exactly the same, because like we've already alluded to, that's just not the case. Unfortunately, each committee, each person, each program is going to look for different things in an application and going to place emphasis in different areas. We don't all have the same amount of prerequisites, the same type of prerequisites. Just because one school may accept that level of anatomy and physiology doesn't mean the other school will. So that's probably one that can deter students from making sure that they're matching everybody's application requirements and making sure that you're just checking with all the schools that you're interested in, making sure that you're aligning yourself there. So that's probably the largest one. Other ones would be, and you know, some of this is just coming from our program standpoint, is it's not necessarily the amount of times that you apply means you're going to have an increased chance of getting in. So sometimes it's not just about submitting the same thing over and over again. If you're a reapplicant, you need to do something different each time that you're reapplying, because there's a reason that you weren't selected for an interview or a spot in the program. So some students choose to just submit the same thing over and over again, thinking, well, I applied, and every year I apply, I have a greater chance of getting in. Now, at some programs that may be the case. They may place a certain emphasis on the amount of times you've applied to show commitment to that program, and that's just fine, but that's not true for all programs. Those are kind of two of the things that I can think of off the top of my head.
For returning applicants, I think demonstrating what's changed since the previous application is really helpful, being on the admission committee. So if you don't get in the first time, don't give up. Keep applying, but then keep doing the things that you feel are important for your application, but also that are important to you personally, because again, that commitment to your personal agenda, your personal goal to become a physician assistant is really what we're going to look for, and we're okay about you didn't get in the first time, that's fine, but we'll look at, you know, what have you done in the interim and give you another look.
And the only other couple of comments I would offer is that I don't think there are many PA programs that simply draw a line for the GPA and make their decision solely on those types of numbers. Most of them, I think, do look for trends over time. They do look for performance in upper-level science coursework. They do look for other mechanisms by which to tease out sort of the diamonds in the rough sometimes. You may not have all the numbers that match up exactly with what might be published as sort of their typical successful applicant. And so even though we have large numbers, I think most programs still are very dedicated to really looking through your application. So take advantage of the opportunities when you can to highlight, you know, maybe if you've had a significant change in your performance, highlight that, draw our attention to it. Tell us why that occurred. Why all of a sudden were you able to really improve your performance if your GPA isn't quite as high as many of the other successful applicants. I think also don't or I should say probably underestimate the importance that the letters of recommendation can sometimes play. I think in some instances you might choose somebody that maybe has not known you as well or worked as closely with you, and so their letter doesn't provide us with a lot of detailed information or specifics. So really give some consideration to that process. I would encourage you to, you know, talk to the individuals that you're thinking about having write a letter of recommendation for you. Highlight for them the things that, you know, you really think are important or are going to be meaningful to the programs that you're applying to. I would straight out ask them, you know, are you able to provide me a positive letter of recommendation? That's not the place you want to be surprised, is when it gets submitted onto the system and then everyone else is reading something that was less than flattering about you. Because the reality is, in most cases, the applicants are going to have very positive letters of recommendation, and those don't stand out honestly anymore as much as the ones where we get one that is not very flattering, and that suddenly becomes something that catches our attention. So just do your homework, make sure that the people who have been writing the letters of recommendation for you are people that know you and that will be honest about it, but also are going to be able to provide a positive letter for you.
Yeah, just to jump on the letter of recommendation thing, absolutely. And also that they have the time to write. That's something that we see frequently, is that that person may not have the time to dedicate to write a really nice letter for you, or they may not be tech savvy enough to understand the system, because it's all electronic now on CASPA. And so we see frequently, you know, John Smith would make a great PA. I recommend him. well, that does nothing for us, you know, but this person probably spent hours with this individual or has known them for years. For us also, a misconception is that it's the position of the person, not necessarily the relationship to you. So we tend to see letters of recommendation that would come from somebody who you've only shadowed for 2 hours, but they're the CEO of the hospital or something of that nature that they think we're really going to place a lot of emphasis on. And for most PA programs, everybody looks at it differently again, but it's more the relationship that they have with you and their in-depth knowledge about you and what they can tell us about you as a potential PA, more so than just their job title or what great things they may have done.
Okay, now we have time. I would like to open the floor up to anyone who has a question for our panelists.
Since you're going to be training us as family practice providers, do you prefer for us to be working in a family practice atmosphere prior to coming in? So for right now, I'm an MA in OBGYN. So would you prefer that we're working in a family practice situation right now, or is that okay to be in a specialty department? Anybody?
Anyone.
I'll answer once.
Yeah, we'll probably all put our 2 cents in on to this one. I think for us, no, not necessarily. We want to see a wide variety of backgrounds, and that's what makes each PA class unique, is that everybody's coming in with a different set of already special areas that they place of emphasis on in their application process. And so for us, that's not necessarily going to make an applicant automatically more competitive if they're in family practice. You can be just as competitive being OBGYN, oncology, all the different ones that you could be in, because that's going to bring a different set of strengths into the classroom than we may not see from another applicant. So I think, and that may be a general answer, that I think we're okay if you're not in the specialty we're looking for.
Yes, I concur. We are looking for diverse experiences because each person brings in their unique experience and strengths. And it's wonderful to see that collaborative approach to learning. And it really models what's going to happen in practice when you become a member of a healthcare team, which is how delivery is being made now of healthcare as a team approach.
Yeah, for us, it's really more, we're wanting people to come in with their eyes open to what it's like to work with patients, you know, so direct patient contact is really the valuable thing from our vantage point. It would be, again, a tragedy if you got, you know, into the point in the training where you start interacting with the patients and go, you know, these sick people are not that much fun to be around after all. So that part is far more important than the specific specialty. That having been said, just from your own personal standpoint, I think there is some real value in trying to get work in an area that you think you're naturally drawn to or anticipate you're going to want to work in, just because I think it will help to expose you to it, to find out if it does feel like it's an area you derive a lot of satisfaction from. However, we also know that many students who come to us and maybe think that they're going into a particular specialty, after they go through the various different disciplines as part of their clerkships, realize, gosh, you know, all of a sudden pediatrics is great. I didn't really think I was going to like that, but I do. And so we know that there's that element as well. You're not going to experience every discipline, but I think there is some value to doing it from a personal standpoint.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Madeline. As far as medical hours go, I know some PA schools have paid medical hours are required and some are not required for unpaid. What do you think is the huge difference in that?
Yeah, so if you couldn't hear the question, basically it was, Madeline was asking us whether or not being paid as your previous healthcare experience is critical or not, and if there is a difference, what is the difference between volunteer experience versus the paid? So I would say there are a number of programs that do really look at paid. Some will take both. We're open to either paid or volunteer. And so I think the difference really is that, as you might imagine in healthcare systems today, while it's great to volunteer, and I think that speaks to your altruism and all the other important qualities that we might be looking for, the level of responsibility that you're typically given in terms of interacting with the patient can quite often be very different if you're in a volunteer role as opposed to a paid role where they have, you know, gone through and done all the important checks that they need to and given you the training, so then they feel confident that they can allow you to have more significant interaction with the patient at a level that provides you probably greater opportunity to really be involved in their day-to-day care and those types of activities that might be a better indicator for you as well as you're going through this process to determine for yourself whether or not healthcare is going to be a good fit for you.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Jordan, and I was wondering if you're sort of denied an interview and or do not make it into the program, are you guys open to providing that applicant with ways that they can change their application next time or change adding different experience or whatnot?
I can start this one. I think each program is going to do this differently, how they provide feedback. Please know, I think that every single PA program wants to be able to provide the feedback, but it's more the staffing and availability of that feedback. For example, I did over 60 reapplicant appointments last cycle, and that's a lot of time that was taken away from other things. So it can be very challenging to be able to provide that one-on-one, I'm going to sit down with you and really coach through this. So each program is going to look at it differently. Some it may be, here's some general things that you can do differently that we see applicants who are not invited to interview or who are not invited into the program. Some things that kind of went wrong in their interview or things that are common mistakes that we see. It's always worth calling the program and asking because, again, each program is going to be different about it. I think in general, it does take some self-reflection as being a reapplicant and going through your own materials and kind of figuring out what went wrong, what went right, and how to play up the positive side of that as well. A lot of times reapplicants tend to focus too much on the negative things and get very nervous and apprehensive about those negative qualities when they have so many other positive things that they should be focusing on. But making sure you're looking at each applicant's, or excuse me, each school's average applicants and seeing maybe where you may fall short is a good starting point, and then asking all the schools, you know, can you provide me some feedback? And the answer may be no at some programs. Some programs may say, well, we've got this list that we're able to give to you, and some programs may say, absolutely, I can give you some feedback and we can do an interview. Some it may be in person, some may be over the phone. And some programs may do it at different levels, that if you are invited to interview, that they may actually place more emphasis on doing a reapplicant appointment for those that weren't successful at the interview stage, because it means that you were competitive enough to get an interview and something did go possibly wrong in that interview. Another thing about reapplicant before I pass the mic along is just that a lot of times there isn't necessarily something glaringly wrong that you did that you can fix that it's that easy. Most of the students that are coming for an interview are extremely competitive, and they're all really wonderful applicants. We just don't have that many seats in our program. So it may be that it's not that you did terrible on the interview or provided a really negative answer. It's just that maybe another applicant was just a tiny bit stronger, and that's who we went with in that particular year. So it can be really challenging sometimes to even provide that reapplicant feedback depending on the scenario.
These are difficult decisions to make, and in the committee that I sit on, you know, it's almost as though when it comes down to, like, we really get down to the numbers where, okay, we have two people and we have to choose one. And what happens is there has to be an advocate for one of those to really step forward and say, this is why I think we should give this person a chance. And I'd like to say that there are good reasons why that happens, and it doesn't just come down to personal preference, but generally the person who says that has to, you know, back it up. And if the other person has said, you know, I think it should be this person, but they're not that committed, they can't point out why, then it becomes, you know, the person who had an advocate on that particular decision. I don't know how our particular program responds to reapplicants, and I will look into that so that I can be better prepared. But if I would certainly, as Leah said, I would say that it's important for you to check in with the programs if you made multiple applications to see is there a way for you to find that information out. Very good question, very valid.
And real quickly, Jordan, the other thing I would offer to you is that it's a great thing, I think, anytime you're looking to improve yourself, and if you can get feedback from the programs, it's very helpful to you. Obviously, you want to do it in a non-confrontational way. In other words, this isn't your opportunity to sort of argue why you should have been admitted in the last cycle. You know, put that behind you and really look to the front and say, you know, what can I do to strengthen my application? I think is a great way to asked that question, because the applicant pool changes from year to year as well. So what made you particularly competitive in the cycle you were just in might be slightly different in the next cycle with a different group of people. So I think if you approach it from the standpoint of what can I do that would strengthen my application any year, you know, that's usually better received. So.
What's a common way that you guys see people raising their GPA post-graduation?
The question was that what is the common way that people can raise their GPA post-graduation?
Hard work, honestly, but no. I mean, I think the question is really, you know, so if you didn't have a great GPA coming out of your program, what can you do to try to address that particular issue? And so for us, I mean, we do look at trends over time, as I've mentioned a couple of points. We really look back at the last 40 semester hours of upper-level science coursework in particular. So if you find yourself in that situation, my advice to you would be to really take the science coursework going forward that's upper level, as human related as possible, and to do as well on them as you can. And again, that's not necessarily easy, but if you can continue to build up and demonstrate the ability to do well on that type of coursework over a sustained period of time, I think that in many instances for programs will answer the question and help make you competitive.
I would add, additionally, if during the undergraduate experience there were some family circumstances, some mitigating circumstances that explain why that your grades might have not been so impressive, but then as you got to the upper division levels, you showed that there was significant improvement. I think that's really important. At least for our committee, we really want to know, well, what was it? Do you have a good reason why you didn't do as well as you might have? Because we will take that into consideration as well.
PA programs are academically intensive. That's just the nature of the schooling. And I think what the committee wants to see is that you are able to take a full load of upper level coursework and do well the first time around. So there's kind of two ways to increase the GPA. Go back and retake all of the courses, the Gen Bio, the Gen Chem, and do better the second time around. Or there's increasing the GPA by going and taking upper level science courses and doing well the first time around. And that's probably the ideal situation for most PA program committees, is that they want to see that you can handle it the first time around. Most people taking a class twice in a row, they can do better the next time by sheer nature of seeing the material again, but they want to see that you can hit the ground running. And a lot of times in most PA programs, there's not a chance to keep retaking courses over and over again. It's kind of a one-shot opportunity. So that's probably the ideal way to do it, but there are a variety of ways to increase the GPA. And I think another common question in relation to that would be community college versus four-year institution, and where should I go to increase the GPA? Each program, again, we don't like to be easy on you guys, is going to view that differently. So some may say, yes, we'll take community college level classes, no problem. Others may say, no, we need to see those courses come from a four-year institution. So you're wise to be checking with each PA program that you're looking at to try and figure out where you should be taking additional classes at.
What are your thoughts on athletic training as an experience, as experience hours? And what I've noticed is that although we get tons of direct patient care with an athletic training experience, we don't often get interaction with PAs and doctors as much as other experiences. I just want to know what you guys think about that.
So the question was that, what are your thoughts on athletic trainings experience?
So, I mean, the previous healthcare experience is always a challenge for us in terms of just looking at a lot of different backgrounds. You know, for each different program, I think they maybe approach that differently as to what they think is the right number of hours, what's really the best, you know, type of quality experience. So we see a fair number of students come to us with athletic training background. I think the good news is they have definitely acquired some skills in terms of assessing patients, you know, learning how to take a good history, how to do those key parts of the physical exam, how to make a diagnosis, and so those are very good skills to have been exposed to and have under your belt. I think there are some individuals who maybe look at athletic training also and recognize that it's not always, you know, it's a very specialized area, It's not always sort of ongoing, continuous care of patients or continuity of care. Sometimes there may be, but not always. And so I think some programs do value that opportunity as well, to have had previous experience that gives the individual experience to ongoing care day after day with a patient, working closely with them, really getting to know them personally as well as their healthcare needs. And so each program probably values that a little bit differently.
How about some questions up in the balcony there?
Go ahead.
I have here on my talking point list of all the people that, how can you obtain 1,000 hours of clinical experience? Listed number 4 is international medical graduate. So yes, international medical graduates certainly qualify to apply for PA programs.
And just to follow up maybe on just kind of the general international, some programs may not accept international students, and so you'll want to be careful and call the programs you're looking at. I think the majority of them probably do and wouldn't view those students any differently. You're still going to need to meet the same criteria. Probably each program has their own English language proficiency policy about how to demonstrate that, whether it be graduating with a bachelor's degree or TOEFL or something of that nature. But those are instances where you definitely want to be contacting the admissions office at each program to make sure that you're meeting all the things that they would need to see in the application process.
You go back.
So again, I think these are going to vary a bit from program to program. We at the University of Iowa do actually like to see students have been exposed to undergraduate research, maybe not necessarily years of research, that's an expectation, but I think in the healthcare professions today, and in particular as a physician assistant, you're going to be presented with information where you are going to have to be able to sort through that information and decide if it's valid, is it reliable, is it relevant to the patient population you're looking at. You're going to be faced with clinical questions where you're going to need to go out and do your own individual research to look up data and information. You're going to interact with pharmaceutical representatives who want to share their perspective on why a particular study supports their claim for a treatment that they're asking you to consider. And so having been exposed to research, I think really does provide students with important skills in that area of being able to think critically about information and to make sense of it. That having been said, I don't think there are many programs that actually require it, so it's not a requirement per se, but it may be a value-added feature to it. As far as other non-science coursework, absolutely it's valuable. I mean, we look at the science coursework obviously to help us with that aspect of saying, is this a student who's been exposed to a rigorous science coursework background that is going to be likely to help us predict their success in upper level or rigorous science courses work that you're going to experience in the PA program. But other coursework in psychology and sociology and ethics, humanities in general, that broad-based exposure, I think help you relate very well to your patients, hopefully give you, additional perspectives, help you with your interpersonal skills. All those things are really important to relating to a patient and, again, making that connection with them so that in that partnership you can hopefully help them improve their health. So those elements are very important and I think add a lot of value and certainly shouldn't be underemphasized.
The question was that if you've seen any trends in the PA field.
Well, the National Commission for the Certification of Physician Assistants, which is the national certifying organization across the country for all PAs, is now keeping track of that kind of data. And we're just now getting some initial reports about where PAs are working, what are their median salaries, the average age of PAs, years of experience of PAs that are licensed and practicing in the country now. So the trends, it's a great question. I don't think we've had the data to really identify what the trends are. I would say in general, though, the trend for PA practice is to follow where physicians are going, which is more in a specialty-oriented practice. And that's virtually because of the need of the specialists. There are not enough specialists, and PAs and NPs are providing a very important role in giving health services to those specialty patients who require those specialty services. But the trend overall has been heavily more towards women going into the profession. For a number of years that's been the case, but in addition, the change overall in the number of times that a PA may change their type of practice. It depends on how long you've been in practice, but the average is for a PA in practice for about 10 years, I think it is. They may have already worked in two or three different settings. So again, that points to the flexibility of the PA profession. Maybe Rick has more comments about that.
We'll take one last question. Go up there. Yeah.
I was just wondering if you would please highlight a few different routes of clinical experience that we can, a PA might have the best knowledge base for applying.
So the question, if you can highlight the clinical route? The clinical experience.
I can start it off, and then I'm sure we're all kind of jump in. I think some of the most common types of hours that we tend to see would be EMT or paramedic, medical assistant, certified nurse assistant, and then you've got the tech areas, so patient care tech, emergency department tech, and I'm trying to go slow because I see a lot of pens jotting ones down. And you can find these a lot on PA program websites as well. But roles that you're really hands-on with the patient are probably the best way to go. And I frequently advise students that if you need a degree, license, or certificate to complete that job, that's a good sign that it's probably going to work for patient care. If you don't need any training or anything, then that's probably an indicator that it may not work for some programs. So that's kind of the general advice, and those are some of our most popular hours, although all programs take a wide variety, and most of us are looking at more of the job duties than the job title. So just because you are one thing, it's not going to guarantee that that's going to work for us, because most of us are going to look at the job duties and what you're actually doing. So it's important on CASPA to really accurately describe your experiences on there, and that's where that common mistake of fill in later can really hurt a student, because then we don't get to see what you're doing on a daily basis, because CNAs across the country do different things in different states. Medical assistants, it's true everywhere in different settings, different if you're in a hospital versus a clinic, it can be different. So that job description becomes pretty vital in the role.
Would you like me to go on my list here? Let's see, CNAs, LVNs, RNs, chiropractors. Some of the things that are more maybe common, again, paramedics, EMTs, occupational therapists, physical therapists, respiratory therapists, speech therapists, medical assistants, clinical assistants, and scribes. We seem to have a fair number of scribes from the emergency department in our current class, too.
And the only other thing I would offer is that, while we're looking at it from the vantage point of, identifying students who are coming in with their eyes open and are well prepared, you also have to think about it from your perspective. What are those particular elements of that position that are going to be meaningful to me, maybe to help answer questions for me personally? Maybe you're somebody who says, boy, I like the notion of being able to help patients and work closely with them, but if I really have to get, my hands dirty in some element of this, is this going to be something that's just going to really, gross me out? Am I going to be able to, so I mean, you also look at it from the vantage point of what can that particular position help me answer questions about? How will it maybe help me derive whether or not I'm going to be deriving satisfaction and fulfillment from the role of being a caregiver. And obviously you want to keep in mind what the benefits are going to be to the program when they look at those. But again, I think there's a wide array of opportunities that you can come from. The more direct patient contact experience, the better is the bottom line.
Thank you. Can we have a round of applause for our panelists?